Let's talk about King James VI. The first thing that comes to mind for most people is his version of the Bible, but did you know he also wrote a book called Demonology? It covered topics like the occult, witchcraft, alchemy, and the paranormal. He even had his own mother, who was, of course, the queen, jailed and eventually beheaded. His interest in dark magic, some say, led to either a deep paranoia or a love of it. Seems like whatever the case, it definitely occupied a large part of his beliefs. This video will go into the stories surrounding King James and black magic, both in his life and in his writings. If you aren't subscribed to my channel, please take a second to follow me. I have tons of information on many subjects that I think everyone should explore. Thank you for supporting my channel. So let's look at his life and try to determine what he truly thought about these subjects. Was all this just a search for knowledge, or did it border more on paranoia? And more importantly, how did it affect his views on Christianity and the Bible? Okay, so King James was a big deal, ruling Scotland, England, and Ireland. Imagine becoming King of Scotland when you were only a baby. That's what happened to James in 1567. Then, in 1603, he became King of England too, bringing the two kingdoms together. James was king for a really long time, and things changed a lot during his reign. But there was another side to him. He was really interested in spooky stuff like witchcraft and demons. To understand why James was so fascinated by demons, we need to look back at his childhood. It wasn't easy being James. His father was murdered when he was just a baby, and his mom, Mary Queen of Scots, was removed from the throne and beheaded. Some say this was orchestrated by him and the advisors who raised him. So James became king very young, and he was raised by advisors who tried to control him. His teachers were strict and taught him to be suspicious of the Catholic Church and afraid of the devil. Back in the 1500s, people were really afraid of witches. They believed witches made deals with the devil and could do evil things. James's own experiences made him believe in witchcraft too. In 1590, some people were accused of being witches and trying to kill James. This was called the North Berwick witch trials. James questioned the accused himself, and their confessions, probably forced, made him believe witchcraft was real and dangerous. Because of what happened, James wrote a book about witchcraft and demons in 1597. He called it Demonology. This book shows us what James believed about magic, the devil, and the danger of witches. It's a scary book that gives us a glimpse into the mind of a king who was afraid of the dark arts. It was very unusual for a king to write a book like this, but James wanted everyone to know about the threat of witchcraft. In his book, James explains different types of magic. He delves into the intricate world of the supernatural, categorizing magic into two distinct types, good magic and evil magic. This distinction is crucial in understanding the beliefs and fears of the time. He says there's good magic and evil magic. Good magic, according to James, is often associated with healing, protection, and benevolent spirits. It is the kind of magic that aligns with the natural order and is often used for the benefit of the community. Evil magic is when you make deals with the devil, which, let me say, is very bad. Don't mess with it, kids. Seriously though, this type of magic involves invoking dark forces and making pacts with demonic entities. James describes these pacts as dangerous and corrupting, leading individuals down a path of moral and spiritual decay. He also describes ways people try to tell the future and do magic, such as using tarot cards, crystal balls, and other divination tools. These practices were seen as attempts to gain forbidden knowledge and control over one's fate, often viewed with suspicion and fear, things we might call superstitions today. These superstitions included a wide range of practices, from carrying talismans for protection to performing rituals to ward off evil spirits. James's book provides a detailed account of these beliefs, reflecting the anxieties and uncertainties of the era. The scariest part of the book is when James talks about the devil's powers and how he tricks people. He describes the devil as a cunning and malevolent being capable of deceiving even the most pious individuals. The devil's tricks are varied and insidious, designed to lead people astray and into sin. He says the devil is sneaky and knows how to make people do bad things. The devil's influence can manifest in subtle ways, such as whispering temptations into a person's ear, or creating situations that test one's moral resolve. James warns that vigilance and faith are necessary to resist these temptations. James warns against being prideful, greedy, and lustful. These vices are seen as gateways for the devil to exert his influence. Pride, for instance, can lead to a sense of superiority and entitlement, making one more susceptible to the devil's manipulations. Because these things make it easier for the devil to control you. Greed and lust similarly weaken one's moral defenses, creating vulnerabilities that the devil can exploit. James's book serves as a cautionary tale, urging readers to remain vigilant and morally upright to avoid falling into the devil's traps. So, one has to wonder, did he have first-hand experience with this type of thing? Sure seems like it to me. The North Berwick witch trials were a scary time, a period marked by fear, superstition, and a fervent belief in the supernatural. These trials took place in the late 16th century in Scotland, and they were some of the most infamous witch trials in history. They show us what happened when King James VI's beliefs about witchcraft were put into action. James was deeply convinced that witches were real, and that they posed a significant threat to his reign and the safety of his kingdom. One of the most dramatic accusations was that people were using witchcraft to try to sink the king's ship. This belief stemmed from an incident in 1589 when James was returning from Denmark with his new bride, Anne of Denmark. Their ship encountered a terrible storm, which James believed was caused by witches. Many people, mostly women, were accused of being witches. These accusations were often based on little more than hearsay, superstition, and personal vendettas. The accused were subjected to brutal interrogations and forced confessions. They were tortured using horrific methods, such as the thumbscrew and the boot, to extract confessions. Many of these confessions were made under duress and were not reliable. Nevertheless, they were used as evidence to convict and execute the accused. James was directly involved in the trials, often attending them in person. His involvement lent a sense of legitimacy to the proceedings and encouraged others to believe in the reality of witchcraft. His fear of witchcraft was so intense that he even wrote a book on the subject. His belief in the accusations shows how afraid he was of witchcraft. These trials were extreme, involving public executions and widespread panic. The fear of witches was so pervasive that it led to a culture of suspicion and paranoia. But sadly, they weren't uncommon back then. Witch trials were happening all over Europe, and thousands of people were accused, tortured, and executed. The North Berwick witch trials were just one example of this widespread phenomenon. We here in the United States had our own version of this, the Salem witch trials. Because James was so involved and wrote his book, Demonology, he became known as a king obsessed with demons. His book detailed his beliefs about witchcraft and provided a guide for identifying and prosecuting witches. This obsession with demonology had a lasting impact on history, influencing witch hunts and trials for years to come. James's fear and fascination with the supernatural left a dark legacy that would haunt Europe for centuries. James's book wasn't the only time he showed interest in the supernatural. There were rumors about people with magical powers in his court. Some may have even tried to impress the king with their supposed abilities. Back then, people couldn't always tell the difference between magic and science. Things we might think are superstitions today were taken seriously. For example, people believed in astrology, even smart people like James. He asked astrologers for advice about the kingdom and his own life because he thought the stars could predict the future. Also, alchemy was a very common practice. James's fear of witchcraft and his role in punishing those accused of it had a big impact on England and Scotland. His book, Demonology, became very popular and influenced what people believed about witchcraft. Sadly, during his reign, more and more people were accused of witchcraft and killed. We don't know exactly how many people were victims, but James's beliefs and actions created a scary time where people were afraid of being accused of witchcraft. King James was a complicated guy. Born in 1566, he became King of Scotland as James VI at just 13 months old, and later, in 1603, he ascended to the English throne as James I. His reign marked the union of the Scottish and English crowns, a significant historical milestone. But beyond his political achievements, James was a man of many contradictions. He was smart, religious, and a good politician who ruled during a time of big changes. James was known for his intelligence and scholarly pursuits. He was deeply religious, commissioning the King James Bible, which remains one of the most influential translations of the Bible to this day. Politically, he navigated the complex landscape of early 17th century Europe with skill, balancing the interests of different factions and maintaining relative peace. But he was also really afraid of the supernatural. James's fear of witchcraft and the supernatural was well documented. He believed that witches were in league with the devil and posed a real threat to his kingdom. This fear was not uncommon in his time, but James took it to another level, becoming personally involved in witch trials and even authoring a book on the subject. His book, Demonology, shows us what he believed and how determined he was to fight against what he saw as a real threat. Published in 1597, Demonology is a treatise on witchcraft and the occult. In it, James outlines his belief in the existence of witches and demons, and provides a guide for identifying and prosecuting witches. The book reflects his deep-seated fears and his commitment to eradicating what he saw as evil influences. James's story reminds us that fear and superstition can be dangerous if we let them control us. The witch hunts that took place during his reign led to the persecution and execution of many innocent people. These events serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of allowing fear and superstition to override reason and justice. So, with this being known, how does that impact his interpretation of biblical events? It also shows how religion, politics, and personal experiences can shape what people believe and change the course of history. James's beliefs were influenced by his religious convictions, his political ambitions, and his personal experiences, including an alleged assassination attempt by witches. His reign illustrates the complex interplay between these factors and how they can shape the actions of a ruler and the fate of a nation. I thank you for watching, and as always, stay informed.